Hello guys, this is your friend Multiverse Shinobi 2.0 and we are back with a new fanfic. Which is what if Demonic Naruto becomes bloodthirsty for 4th Hokage Part 1. And if you enjoy this fanfic then please press the like button and subscribe to my channel for more fanfic like this. And now let's start the fanfic. Scene change. A loud roar split the night as the great nine-tailed fox watched the man its container had married left her impaled on its claw, having substituted with the red head right before the Reaper could rip out his soul. Everyone who was there was immediately shocked that the blonde had broken such an ancient law with almost no thought behind his action. He smiled to himself as he watched his son accept the remainder of the fox's chakra, while the many seals he had on his own body began to change the demon chakra inside his own body to match his own. Don't worry Kushina, I'll be sure to tell Sarutobi to keep the villagers from going too far. The man said as he lifted the baby from the woman's arms, ignoring the slowly fading Reaper and its shouts of broken deals. After all, he was the greatest Hokage. He didn't have anything to worry about now that he had all of the Uzumaki seals mastered. Just after he picked up the boy, his only remaining student and one of the three that was in on his plans, Kakashi Hatake appeared behind him. Make sure you tell Hiruzen the story, exactly as we practiced. I'll be heading to meet Obito before going to the bunker. The silver-haired man nodded as he took the child, glad that his sensei's plan was finally going into play. He didn't want him to go, but he knew his part. He was to make sure that the Anbu would never arrive on time to save Naruto until the beatings had gotten to a certain point. After that the unsuspecting Hiruzen would arrive to save the boy and unknowingly aid his successor's plans. Minato smiled as he watched the silver-haired boy vanish before heading to one of the Namikaze labs, or an Orochimaru hideout due to how perfectly the man had stumbled across them. It made him glad that his occultist clan mates' tests were so easily pawned off onto the snake man. The blonde vanished in a flash of yellow, never once catching the way his wife's corpse began to change. Konoha outskirts, Kyuubi destroyed zone, Naruto Uzumaki, 6 years later. Naruto Uzumaki was a lot of things, a 6-year-old boy, the only non-Yamanaka blonde in Konoha, and 1 year away from ninja training. However, right now he was smiling like he had just won the lottery. Why? Because his friend Alice had finally invited him to her home. You see, Naruto was not well liked in the village for some reason. He was always chased when he left the orphanage, which he often did despite the friendly woman who ran the place saying not to. He would even sometimes get caught, which meant he would go to the hospital to meet his old man and the silver-haired dog man. However, going out was also the only time he got to see his friend Alice, who had found him the very first time he escaped from the mob of drunks. The girl was odd the first time he saw her, with porcelain white skin, golden blonde hair, and a blue and white dress in some weird style he had never seen before. She was quite the sight. However, she was always coming up with games for them to play, like the knife-throwing game that was a bit different than the ninja one and Catch the Rabbit, which was a game where he had to find a strange white rabbit that Alice would sometimes bring. She said that his name was Chernobog but he just called it Snow. After that the two would talk about Naruto, what he liked, what he had done since they last met, and if he wanted to play a special game with her. He always said no to that last one since he could only play it once, but since today was his birthday he had said yes if it could be today. The girl had smiled brightly and went off to make the plans, giving him a neatly drawn map to an old building where she lived with her older sister. When he had told the matron about this, the woman had smiled and given him a kiss on the forehead, saying that she gave him a special good luck charm. He thought that the charm was great because nobody saw him even when he was in the middle of the road. Now though, he was standing in front of an old rundown house that looked to be partially collapsed, making him wonder at how Alice always kept her dress so clean before he walked into the house through the partially destroyed door. Naruto had expected to see a large amount of broken furniture with pieces of the walls and ceiling all over the place. Instead he came into a sort of church building, with black brick walls and glowing purple symbols on strange banners. However, his inspection was cut short when Alice appeared next to smiling brightly. You came, you really came. I can't believe it. Naruto smiled at his friend's excitement, quickly following her as she dragged him towards the altar. However, he couldn't help but notice that her hands were ice cold. It was odd, but he wouldn't judge her. She was the only friend he had. All the other children followed the aide's example of staying as far away from the boy as possible. He didn't know why, but back when the not drunk people were the only ones in the mob, they started winding up dead, or at least that was what people thought due to their mysterious disappearances and the fact that their entire homes were covered in blood when they were searched. Still, as Alice began to lay him on the altar, a woman with long red hair and black priest robes walked out of a large door at the back of the church, which let Naruto catch just a glimpse of what looked like a woman before the door shut. "Ah, so you finally invited him over, Alice?" the redhead said with a small smile on her face as Alice nodded excitedly. "Yep, it's his birthday today, so he wants to play the special game." Naruto was utterly lost as the two girls talked. However, he couldn't help the feeling of dread that was building in his gut. What are they talking about? He wondered as the redhead walked towards him. The woman stopped next to his head and stroked his hair, her smile turning just a bit more loving as she stroked his hair. "Don't worry. You will only feel a slight pinch before Mama will make it better." Naruto looked at the woman questioningly before he felt something bind his arms and legs to the altar as the woman forced his mouth open, letting Alice show him a small creature that was curled into a strange shape. "Let the game begin," the blonde girl said, her voice holding a strange presence it didn't have before as she dropped the creature into his open mouth. That was immediately followed by pain as the redhead placed her hand on his shoulder as a bright light erupted from her hand, and that was all he knew before the pain caused him to black out. Konoha outskirts, mysterious church, Alice. The little blonde girl giggled as she watched the boy's body change, and his already delicious power turn that much more appealing to her kind. That was mainly because Alice was a demon, to be more specific, a chaos demon. She was personally glad that she got to help prepare Naruto for these two gifts. However, she couldn't help but want him to just help her with her games, but that was not her place to pick. The red-head woman looked like she was just about to cry as Naruto thrashed around in pain. While she might be a little worried for the boy, she wasn't heartless after all. She trusted that he would be fine. After all, she had already chosen to follow him without the oath of subjugation by the cathedral. There was just something about him. Shaking her head at the new minister's behavior, Alice began to walk out of the building. She stopped when a voice called out to her. "Remember that Naruto will need some special nutrients when he awakens, so be sure to pick them up." Alice just nodded as she grinned. That meant that she got to play some more before she had to come home. 8 years later, Cathedral of Shadows, Naruto. Naruto sat with his back against the wall as he panted from the exertion he had just gone through. He was currently in his home for the past 8 years basement, which was made specifically to help train him in controlling his new powers. Apparently the game Alice had him play all those years ago was actually a ritual designed by the ruler of the cathedral to create something called a demi-fiend. The reason he had starting the training now was that he had just been held back in the ninja academy for being the nine-tailed Jinchuriki. According to Kushina, the Minister of Shadows and his current caretaker, the people of the Leaf were nothing more than dead weight and easily swayed by senseless logic, if it could even be called that. The woman seemed to be a bit too personal about this, but after finding out that the matron at the orphanage had been a demoness named Lilith and he lived in a demon church, that wasn't a big concern. However, he was giving a mission from the higher up in the church, a woman who was the avatar of death, where he was supposed to stay in the Leaf Village until a certain event in the future. "Oh Naruto, where are you?" his training partner sang out as she searched for him, drawing Naruto from his trip down memory lane as he realized that the voice was really close to his current position. Pressing his body farther into the shadows of the wall as he started trying to sneak away from the source of the voice, trying being the key word as his hunter came around the corner at the very moment he started. The woman who came around the corner was someone who he had been getting intimately familiar with, mainly because she had been throwing him around like a ragdoll whenever he had trained in his new powers, especially his Atma. The woman had long blood-red hair with two tufts sticking out of the top like ears while her eyes were crimson with slit pupils. Her body was covered with a crimson fur that hid every inch of her skin from view with the exception of her face, hands and feet. However, the main draw of the woman was the 9 fox-like tails that sprouted from her back, letting everyone with 2 brain cells know that this was the 9-tailed fox that had attacked Konoha all those years ago. However, to Naruto this woman was Kurama, his sadistic teacher that took great joy, almost too much in the blonde's opinion, in throwing him through walls in an effort to get his many skills under control. Knowing that he was doomed otherwise, Naruto allowed a sliver of his newfound demonic power to slip into his system towards his forearms, morphing said areas into long 5-fingered fox paws topped with sharp claws as his left eye bleed into a solid crimson. Kurama frowned at the blonde's obvious fear of one of the powers she was supposed to train before grinning as she felt his other power building for an attack. At least he isn't afraid of that particular energy. The fox thought to herself as she charged the blonde, who only had time to yelp before he was quickly and brutally overpowered. 1 hour later, Naruto's room. Naruto sat on his bed panting after his training session, with the fox as Alice crouched behind him to assist in one of his usual after-training routines, finding all of the pieces of the basement wall that had been lodged in his body from the many trips he had taken into the wall. In order to wait out the pain of the process, Naruto began to look around his room. It was very sparsely furnished, featuring only a wardrobe, his bed, and a crystal ball on a black marble pedestal. The room had dark blue walls with purple carpets to match the cathedral's colors, while his bed was decorated with a dark orange quilt with a red spiral in the center. It was the room he had been living in for the past few years and he had yet to change anything about it besides his bed sheets. That might be a good thing to do later. The demi-fiend in training thought before a grunt of pain forced its way through his throat, causing the blonde to turn a flat stare onto the smiling demon girl behind him. Said girl only giggled before licking his blood off of the stone and tossing it into a small basket beside her. "Can't you at least try to be gentle, Alice?" Naruto asked as he had his first demon remove the shards of masonry from his back after his training, again. The blonde Lolita merely smiled at him as she grabbed the last of the shards, before she violently ripped it from her friend's back. "Why would I do that? You look so much better with a nice layer of red. I find it appealing to say the least." The girl followed up her statement by licking his blood off of the rock in a slow, teasing manner before depositing into the basket and jumping off the bed. Naruto sighed as he stood up to follow before a squeaky voice ripped through the air. "Who said you could move? Certainly not Lady Alice." Both Naruto and Alice turned an annoyed glance towards one of their least favorite people, Chernobog. Chernobog was a white rabbit with a boy on its left ear that marked it as female. However, that was not as unusual to the duo. The more important fact about this rabbit was not that it could talk or that it wore a bow, but that it could not die. The reason Naruto knew that was because he had killed the thing 4 times in the past month while Alice had done it 12 times, but it always came back in a matter of minutes. However, it only enjoyed coming back when Alice was the one who killed it. "Quiet, Chernobog. He is my leader, which makes him much more important than you. Do you understand, or should I let him play with you again?" Alice followed her statement by wrapping her arms around Naruto in a just barely within friend range hug while giving the rabbit a smile, and Chernobog became livid almost immediately after. However, the main reason for that might have been because of the confusion she felt after being assigned a gender after so long of being genderless, which she could blame Naruto for because he hated thinking of the rabbit as an it. Before anything else could be said or done, however, Kushina came into the room with a roll of bandages before freezing at what she saw. Naruto could only gulp as the woman's hair began to rise into a set of tails that the blonde knew that there would be hell to pay. The next morning, Naruto was rushing through the doors of the cathedral as he tugged on the last piece of his usual outfit. Said outfit consisted of a black hooded jacket with stylized designs that looked like demons and angels on each sleeve, while the back of the jacket was dominated by a large number of shapes that came together to make a fox, not a 9-tailed one but a regular fox. His lower body was covered by a study pair of dark gray Anbu-styled pants while his feet were covered by a pair of study work shoes. It was supposedly a special form of clothing worn by a powerful man a long time ago, but that was only according Kurama. To him it was just cool looking and comfy. Anyway, Naruto smiled as he navigated the narrow back streets of Konoha in his casual clothes with a small smile on his face as he made his way through the alleyways that lay between the cathedral and the Konoha Shinobi Academy. He was heading there for the second day of a short, get to know your class, event. It was something that happened every year on the week before the academy starts, but normally he was excluded from the other wannabe ninja. However, this time it was different, mainly because yesterday he had met a girl who had actually wanted to hang out with him before heading home. Now though, he was going to meet her again at the gates before heading to the Ichiraku ramen bar for something to eat. However, when he emerged from the alley, he came across something that immediately turned his good mood sour. His new friend, a girl that went by the name of Tenten, was in a rather heated argument with a bear of man. And from what he could tell, it was about him, typical. Why do I have to stop hanging out with him? He's a nice guy. Why can't you see that? Tenten yelled at the man, who was obviously more than a little angry that this was happening before he spotted the object of the current argument and growled. Fine then, I'll give you a choice. You can keep being friends with that boy. The man looked like he was forcing himself not to say something else, but I don't want to see hide nor hair of you at the shop again. The man stared Naruto down at this, really hammering it home for the blonde that he was the cause of this. The girl, however, didn't fold, but that might have been because she was only recently adopted by the man. That was something she was not afraid to let him know either. You really think that threat will work? Your wife adores me and will be really angry with you for kicking me out. The man growled as he realized that the girl was once again the winner of their arguments between them, and for the same reason as always. He shot the blonde one last dirty look as he approached before storming off, anger and depression all but flowing off of him. The girl frowned at the sight of her adopted father as well as the hushed whispers of demonic corruption and fox hunts from the nearby civilians. She decided to brush them off for now and turned around to head back to the meeting point, only to gasp when she saw her new friend with a depressed look on his face. She didn't even get the chance to say anything before the blonde looked away as he let out a hasty apology and taking off towards the alleyways. Tenten took off after him, causing her to miss a team of 4 returning students take to the roofs after the blonde as well. Box Alley. Naruto arrived in one of the few alleys that ended in a large box due to the reconstruction by Kurama's forced attack. He was currently in the process of calming down as his sadness triggered his Atma, meaning that the Atma lines crawling across his face while his fiend tattoos also began to manifest. All in all, it made staying calm really difficult due to the multiple warring energies in his body. Unfortunately, it was at that moment that the ragtag team of failures landed in the alley behind him in an effort to box him in. Those poor idiots didn't know what they were dealing with. The warring emotions with Naruto swiftly settled on anger as he took in the 4 people in front of him as the leader stepped towards him with a scowl on his face as he began talking. See, our parents were right. Not only is this kid a monster, but he also took over that poor girl's mind. It's up to us to put a stop to. The boy didn't get to finish before a fist was driven into his throat, followed by his nose being forced to meet the blonde's knee and finally finishing the boy by grabbing him by the throat and slamming him into the ground. The poor kid's 3 friends could only stare in shock and fear as the blonde turned his gaze towards them. You showed up at the worst possible time. That was all the blonde had time to say before the 3 kids booked it, especially since they just watched the strongest of them get destroyed without a chance. After they left, Naruto turned his gaze towards the last boy and kicked him in the gut as thanks, because if the idiot hadn't tried to attack him, he more than likely would have lost control, and that would have all but ruined the plan. With a sigh of relief at the control he currently had, Naruto began to make his way back to the academy. That course of action was halted when he spotted Tenten at the mouth of the alley with starry eyes at what she just saw, and Naruto knew what she was going to ask before the words even left her mouth. You gotta teach me how to do that. Naruto sighed again before smiling at the girl, glad that she was still willing to be his friend after how her adopted father had acted about it. He decided to rationalize it like Kurama and Alice did: humans are strange. 3 months later, with Naruto. If one were to be close to the broken down building that held the Cathedral of Shadows, they would have little trouble hearing the sounds of combat from its basement. The opponents currently involved in said combat are the team of Naruto and his friend Tenten versus the ever sadistic Kurama, but the only thing different about this training from the usual getting thrown into walls was that the duo was doing an okay job covering each other. However, with all the experience the duo had working together, things were going a bit differently. Zan! Naruto shouted as he threw a blast of wind at Kurama as the fox attempted to lodge her fist in Tenten's stomach, forcing the fox woman to dodge or be thrown into a wall herself. The time that it took for Kurama to avoid the wind attack gave the bun-haired girl time to make her way over to Naruto, and that made Kurama smirk at how quickly the girl had adapted to her new place in the church. The fox discarded those thoughts as she rushed at the duo, hoping to land a solid hit on one of them, an action that was becoming rarer as the two kept getting better at working as a team. She was caught off guard when, instead of dodging her attack, the duo charged to meet her instead. The fox only had time to widen her eyes as Tenten lashed out with a kunai, the weapon radiating the aura of a gram slice, while Naruto attempted to drive his own fist into her stomach in a lunge. The duo had managed to effectively trap her as there was no way for her to stop her own movement. To dodge backwards while going straight would cause her to meet both attacks. In addition to that, she couldn't go to either side as their attacks were spaced perfectly to guarantee at least one would hit. The fox had to smile at that, on the inside of course, as she dodged Tenten's gram slice and accepted the fist into her stomach, soon followed by the rest of Naruto's body as he allowed his momentum to carry him into the lunge. However, the fox looked slyly at the blonde before wrapping her arms around his neck and pulling his head into her, taking an almost sick satisfaction from the feelings of embarrassment and utter loathing from Tenten and Alice respectively. However, she took a special joy in the almost overwhelming rage from Kushina, even though the woman was on almost the other side of the cathedral. A few hours later, Naruto was currently in Kushina's office after the woman stormed into the basement claiming that she felt something terrible in the universe. Still, now Naruto was helping Tenten get the hang of her own powers, which had been granted to her by the comp she currently wore on her right wrist. The sudden power the comp gave her had been a weird situation for the girl at first, but after she learned how the thing worked, it became a lot easier for the girl to adjust. The comp was a metal bracer that was inscribed with countless seals and demonic runes to grant human members of the cathedral, which at this time meant Tenten, access to 3 special abilities, the first of which being the power to use the spells and skills of demons. The second ability a comp granted someone was the Demon Summoning Seal, which allowed the wearing to talk to and make pacts with demons. The last was a feature called the Locator, which was a weird seal on the comp that allowed the wearer to locate any member of the cathedral or demon in the nearby area. Suffice to say, Tenten was shocked when she had fiddled with it in class and found no less than 3 demons, not counting Naruto, in the school alone. Anyway, as Naruto helped the girl on one of the exercises she had been given to help get a bit of control on her pseudo-demonic energy, Naruto couldn't help but look back at how this situation came about. Flashback start: 2.5 months ago, 2 weeks after the previous chapter. Naruto was walking with a shocked Tenten as he led the way towards the cathedral after a very surprising visit from her father. Apparently the man had been serious when he had told the girl she would be disowned if she continued to hang out with him because now she was officially homeless. Not only that, but he was also going through various plans to cause the man pain as he helped carry the girl's stuff to the cathedral after gathering it up off the street. However, he doubted the man was going to be able to hold his marriage together anymore because the duo could still hear the argument the man was having with his wife, and he was willing to bet that the just might end up having to find a new home after tomorrow. Now all he had to do is make sure that Tenten was able to get a place to stay at the cathedral, and that was easier said than done considering he had to convince 3 different people to let her stay. Then again, the only one who might have a problem would be the madam, but he might be able to find some way to convince her. Half an hour later, Cathedral of Shadows, the madam's room. Naruto was currently sitting in the chair and fidgeting as he watched the divider that separated visitors, meaning Kushina and Kurama before now, from the madam. He could see the woman who called herself the Avatar of Death moving about behind the obscuring barrier between them, and he had to admit one thing. This woman really had a way of making him seem really small without even trying, like something deep in his mind just knew that this woman could end him in an instant. It made him wonder why this woman wanted such a large role in his life. "So you wish to let your little friend stay with us?" As the woman spoke, Naruto couldn't stop the sliver of dread that went down his spine as the woman spoke. He could almost imagine the flat stare she was giving him as she moved to the chair on the other side of the divider. After sitting a bit straighter, Naruto mustered up his confidence and responded. "Yes, ma'am, she was kicked out of her home because of me, and I don't care about her life story, Naruto, but I am glad you decided to talk to me about it personally. This is only the second time you've ever been in here after all." Naruto once again felt the dread going down his spine at her words, even though her voice had a definite happy tone. The reminder of just how little he actually talked to her put him on edge. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but please let her. I will allow the girl to stay on 2 conditions." Naruto blinked at that. He was honestly surprised at that. Both Kushina and Kurama would grumble about how this woman required a lot of convincing whenever they left this room, so why was he getting his way this easy? "What are your conditions, ma'am?" He could almost feel the woman's smile as he said this, and the fact that he couldn't tell why she was smiling was worrying. "The first is a fairly easy one. You must convince the girl to wear a device I had Lilith and Kushina make. The second one will be even simpler. Just visit more. I don't want to have to wait 2 years to hear from you again." Naruto gulped as he heard the thinly veiled tone of ire in her voice. It was almost like some invisible pressure had filled the room that let him know just how serious this was. "I can do that, thank you, ma'am. I guess I'll talk to you tomorrow then." The pressure vanished almost instantly as the woman responded. "Yes, you will, and every day after unless told otherwise." Flashback end. Naruto was broken from his trip down memory lane when he felt the pulse of demonic energy from Tenten, and he barely had the time to avoid the small knife of energy that the girl launched by throwing himself to the floor. He gave the girl a flat stare as he got up, and Tenten gave a nervous chuckle as she spoke. "I finally did it." Shaking his head at the girl, Naruto could only grin as he responded with, "Yeah, now let's see you do it without attempting to carve my face off." The girl gave a pout at his words but got right back to work on molding the demonic energy into a suitable form. Neither of the 2 human residents of the cathedral had heard the sounds of Kushina forcibly restraining Alice as the demonic little girl tried to get into the room in order to maim the bun-haired girl for nearly hurting her blonde master. The next morning, Konoha Ninja Academy. Naruto and Tenten were currently sitting in their seats at the academy during the break and working out their plans for that night. The reason for their sudden bout of plotting was because of something they overheard from Kushina just before they had gone to sleep last night. The red-haired woman had been muttering about the Uchiha clan, an event that would happen tonight, and a woman named Makoto. That, combined with how much the duo felt owed the woman for becoming their legal guardian, meant that the duo had hoped that by going to the Uchiha district later they would be able to find Makoto and bring her to the cathedral. If nothing else, the Minister of Shadows would be able to have a friend to talk to other than Kurama and Alice, and since the fox woman seemed to hate her and the demon girl barely tolerated anyone but Naruto, this would without a doubt lift the woman's spirit. However, as was becoming tradition for their school days, the duo was approached by a group of other students who came to save Tenten from Naruto's demonic control, something that the duo often laughed about at the cathedral due to how ironic that statement actually was. Yet the worst part about this little interruption was the leader of the group, a brown-haired boy that went by Ken, who had seemed to have made it his mission in life to hassle the duo ever since the academy started. "Well, if it isn't the village punk and his no-good girlfriend, what are you talking about, huh? Knowing you, it's something that will cause the village trouble." Ken's voice was grating as all hell, And if you add on the fact that his mother was Kazashi Haruno's little sister, and you have one annoying kid that probably shouldn't be a ninja. However, in a relatively welcome addition to the routine that had started, a girl by the name of Beth stood up from her spot across the aisle from the two members of the Demon Church. Beth was a girl with long, straight, light brown hair that fell neatly down to the middle of her back, with the bangs held out of her face by a white cloth with blue designs on it. Her outfit consisted of a dark blue, long-sleeved dress that was cut off just below her hips, and her legs were covered by an off-white pair of pants. Attached to stomach and elbows of the dress were sections of gray leather armor, while her right shoulder had a guard made of lightweight chakra metal, which matched the metal skirt and boots she wore. Finishing of her outfit was a white shoulder cape that had the same blue markings as her headband, only the cape seemed to have seals of some kind built into it, as the girl often changed to color to something more suited to a forest when the class did hide-and-seek exercises. She also has a sword on her hip that is held in a dark blue sheath with a white cloth wrapped around the handle. The girl gave Ken a stern look, which caused the boy to flinch, before she started on one of her now well-known verbal beating. "You all should be ashamed of yourself. Only people who don't respect themselves resort to bullying others. In fact, you should think about how you may be forced to work with some of these people you're bullying may be forced to save your life in the future. What will you do if someone holds a grudge on you and leaves you to die? I hope you take this to heart this time, but knowing you're going to do this again tomorrow." Naruto watched as more members of the group took on a frightened look as they gazed at the two. Beth seemed to have really driven home her point this time, as almost the entire group seemed to be rethinking the lies that may or may not have been fed to them by their parents. It was this reason that Beth was one of the only people the duo counted as friends. The other four who were a part of that circle were three boys, Yoshio, Woro, and Rock Lee, and another girl that went by Kaga. All in all, the 7 students were a very tight-knit group, but there was conflict among them as well that was mostly present in Yoshio and Woro. In fact, whenever the two were near each other and started to give opinions, it almost always devolved into a fight. However, both boys respected Naruto enough to follow his lead when they chose teams for group practice. After his followers had gone back to their seats, Ken turned towards the two with a sneer and opened his mouth to speak, but fortunately was cut off by the two Chunin sensei coming into the room to start the lesson. This made the boy grit his teeth before heading to his seat, not wanting to get detention for disrupting the lessons. This left the duo with plenty of time to finish up their planning before the academy let out for the day. Later that day, end of the academy. Finally over. I thought it'd never end. Naruto said as he led the group of 7 out of the building they had been stuck in. Naruto gave a quick glance to the clock sitting on the gates to the academy and was happy that there was still time left before the plan he and Tenten had come up with needed to start, giving him some free time to spend with his friends. Speaking of friends, Naruto heard the telltale voice of Rock Lee, causing the blonde to look back at him as he shouted, "Indeed, Naruto, no matter how important this knowledge will be to our shinobi career, there must be another way to teach us than countless minutes of lectures." Rock Lee was a fair-skinned black-haired boy that wore said hair in a long braid and normally wore a Chinese-styled martial arts outfit. The boy had been the first to join the group after Tenten, having heard about the blonde convincing his guardian to take her into their home, and as such had stated that he was a man worthy of his friendship for being so generous. In response to Lee's statement, Woro gave a hearty laugh before responding with, "You got that right, fuzzy brows. I really wish they start train us in ninjutsu though." Woro was a slightly pale boy with short dark brown hair that he spiked up in the front, while he wore a long dark gray camouflage trench coat over a white t-shirt and black pants with his feet covered by sturdy black boots, and he also wore a pair of tinted glasses. Wario's joining of the circle had been more eventful, as when he first met Naruto he was being beaten up by a group of kids that had claimed that he owed them money. This led to Naruto calling the kids out, calling them weak for needing to gang up on someone to win. This led to the group turning their anger on him, which led to Naruto taking a few down before their numbers started to overwhelm him, as the blonde had never faced multiple opponents before. However, that quickly changed once Woro had joined the fight, and the two had quickly taken down the group and became friends afterward. Of course you can't wait to learn jutsu. A person like you only care about making the biggest explosions possible and not something like genjutsu or medical jutsu. This time it was Yoshio who spoke, taking his usual digs at Woro as he normally did, seeing as how they both had vastly different views on life. Those views happened to be Yoshio wanting to be a ninja to keep Konoha peaceful, while Woro wanted to become the strongest ninja in village, but not Hokage as he couldn't stand paperwork. Yoshio was a boy with slightly tan skin, shoulder length, wavy light brown hair, and he normally wore a closed red jacket and dark blue pants with the standard shinobi sandals, which were also red. The reason Yoshio became a member of the group, despite his immense dislike of Woro, was for a slightly tamer incident than Woro. On the day after the beating Naruto and Woro gave to the group of kids, Naruto had been heading to the exit from the bathroom when three of the group had managed to sneak up on the blonde as he entered the entry hall and get in a few good sneak attacks before he could respond. However, when Naruto did respond, one of the teachers had come into the hall and caught sight of the blonde attacking the kids. This had led to the blonde being dragged to the headmistress' office before Yoshio arrived, having seen what had happened from the second floor, and told the teacher what had happened, leading to the three kids being dragged off instead of Naruto. This led to the two hitting it off and becoming fast friends, though Naruto doubted that Yoshio would ever be able to be anything close to civil with Woro without him around. Kaga sighed as she picked up her pace, joining Naruto and Tenten up near the front as she started grumbling about the two children that had started arguing behind them, making Naruto smile and Tenten giggle as Yoshio and Woro fought, while Rock Lee tried and failed to get the two to settle down. Kaga was a girl in the year ahead of the rest of the group, and she took advantage of that fact by calling the rest of the group kids, though it was mainly when a fight broke out between the two opposing forces. Kaga normally wore a long dark red dress with the shoulders being drawn over a pair of pads, while the front was exposing a black shirt and necklace with 6 large beads on it. Kaga had joined up with the group rather suddenly a week after Yoshio did, having heard about Naruto's triumphs over the other children, and had told the blonde that he was strong enough to be her subordinate. That was ignored as Naruto declined instantly. The girl had not given up, however, and over the course of another week decided that she would rather have him as a friend than not at all. After the group had gotten a few blocks away from the academy, and Naruto had stopped Woro from attacking Yoshio or vice versa, Tenten turned towards the blonde and asked, "So Naruto, what should we do now that the group is all here?" This led to Naruto looking at the group before turning to the bun-haired girl and saying, "We get lunch." This statement was met with shouts of approval from Woro and Rock Lee, smiles from Tenten and Beth, and nods of acceptance from Kaga and Yoshio. It was this reason that Naruto was the center of the group. He was the only one that knew exactly how to make everyone agree on something before the group headed towards their usual after-school hangout. Ichiraku Ramen Bar. As soon as the group had piled into the ramen shack and placed their orders, anyone who cared to listen would hear nothing but the sounds of a group of students enjoying their lunch and everything that goes with it. On the 3 rightmost stools, Woro and Yoshio were having a nice civil conversation about what flavor was the best for ramen, while Rock Lee managed to stop said conversation from devolving into a brawl by sitting between them. On the other end of the row of stools, Beth and Tenten were asked Kaga questions about her studies, wanting to be ahead of the rest of the kunoichi in training by learning from the black-haired girl. In the very center seat, chatting quietly with the waitress Ayame, a brown-haired civilian girl that was the daughter of the man who ran the ramen bar, was Naruto himself. The blonde Jinchuriki turned demon couldn't help but smile as he watched his friends have fun with each other, ignoring the fact that Woro was being held back from slugging Yoshio by Lee after boy made a not too friendly remark about the glasses-wearing boy's mother. It was time like these that the boy wished that the world could be at peace, but then reality set in as a phrase Kushina's constant teaching had drilled into his brain. As long as there are humans, there will be conflict, and as long as there are gods and demons, humans will have a reason to hate. Expertly brushing that thought aside, Naruto reached over and smacked Yoshio on the back of the head before he could rile Woro up and more, giving both a firm glance as their fighting almost damaged the counter they were eating on. The two shared a glance before nodding and giving the noodle their full attention, and just like that Naruto was greeted to the sight of high circle of friend actual peaceful. He gave it 5 minutes before it went back to normal before he ordered another bowl. Just in. Community. Forum. More. Naruto. Demonic Savior by Roan Steele. Megami Tensei in Naruto's overrated. English, Supernatural and Adventure. Naruto U. Words. 27k plus. Faves. 322. Follows. 341. Published. March 10, 2014. Updated. September 25, 2016. 60 Chapter 4. Prologue for the first battle. It's time for another chapter, and this time there will be action involving the Uchiha clan. It's time to get serious. Enjoy the new chapter. Disclaimer. I do not own Naruto or the Mega 10 franchise. If I did, both would more than likely suck, but Kishimoto seems to be done with his yeah. Human disguised demon talking. Human disguised demon thinking. Jutsu, spells, Atma brand. Tailed beast demon, Atma avatar talking. Tailed beast demon, Atma avatar thinking. Scene change. Evening twilight, Cathedral of Shadows, Naruto and Tenten. Are you sure this is a good idea? Tenten asked as she leaned against the door of Naruto's room while the owner of the room was preparing to sneak out of the Cathedral of Shadows. Of course the blonde only gave her a questioning look as he stopped sealing kunai into his right hand, giving the bun-haired girl time to continue her questioning. Think about it, if you go there then wouldn't Kushina just get worried? I mean, she has been depressed since we came back. If she were to find out you vanished, she would more than likely come right after me since Alice and Chernobog are going with you. Naruto nodded at the bun-haired girl's point. She would get in a lot of trouble if the woman found out he was gone. Still, after sealing the last two kunai, the blonde walked over to the girl and grabbed her shoulder as he stared into her eyes. Don't worry, I'll be going there, getting this Makoto woman, and coming right back. What's the worst that could happen? As soon as he finished that question, Naruto walked right out the door of his room, Alice already being in his mental compendium for easy summoning. He never noticed that Tenten was starting to freak out slightly as she imagined exactly what could, and more than likely would, go wrong. This was Naruto she was thinking about after all. Konoha outskirts, area outside of the Uchiha compound, nightfall. Naruto had been intending for his trip to be just a quick in and out, visit the clan head's house, grab Makoto, go home and have a nice snack. That plan had gone out the window when his mind was hit with a wave of fresh life force, something that only happened when he had slain one of his training demons. The fact that he was nowhere near a dead creature meant that so many people were dying in such a short amount of time that it was sending their remaining life force out in a giant tsunami-like pulse that only demons or those with comps would be able to pick up. His was proven right when the voice of a certain white rabbit resounded through his mind. We are going to have company soon. Naruto didn't waste time responding to Chernobog's statement, as that would leave him with less time to escape the inevitable surge of feral demons, and he could hear some of the fast demons rushing towards him as he started to climb the walls of the compound. Naruto yelped as he felt something snap at the air just behind his leg as he pulled himself over the wall and fell onto the ground on the inside of the compound, landing on something soft as he did. Allowing himself a moment to calm down, Naruto looked around to get an idea on what happened and immediately wished he hadn't. Littering the ground around him were various bodies of people who had at one point been members of the Uchiha clan, and he quickly got to his feet as he noticed that he had been lying on the body of a middle-aged man. Naruto swallowed as he felt his throat run dry at the sight of a feast of powerful meat before he beat down his Atma avatar's impulses, not wanting to give in to the desire to gorge himself on the helpless corpses. Shed your human skin, Naruto, some of the demons are getting up the wall. Naruto was thankful when Alice's voice cut through the fog that was clouding his mind as Atma lines had begun spreading across his skin, and he sent the blonde demon girl an affirmative as he pulled his Magatama's powers to the surface. Naruto felt himself slump to his knees as his jacket dissolved into his skin, leaving his upper body bare as a series of complex glowing black tattoos spread across his being, along with a horn that grew out of the nape of his neck. The blonde was vaguely aware of his pants being torn just above his knees as he pushed himself back to his feet, the only thing remaining of his former appearance being his shoes, pants and hair, as his eyes were now a piercing yellow color to show the demonic power racing through his body. Looks like it's getting easy to change. I guess Kurama was right about it getting easier the more I do it. As Naruto said this, he rolled his shoulders, working out the slight stiffness as he noted the underlying demonic tone to his voice. We've got company. Chernobog's shout was the only warning he got before three creatures flopped over the wall and began attempting to stand, and Naruto couldn't help the smirk that crossed his face as he saw what his first real battle was going to be against. The three creatures were very similar to humans at first glance, however, due to his enhanced eyesight, Naruto was able to see the differences clearly. The creatures each had a very dark green skin color, sporting torn but pointed ears and skinny limbs topped with 5 clawed digits each and disgusting yellow eyes. Along with the physical traits, the creatures also smelled like fresh death and decay, along with an hint of old blood that just sealed the deal as to what they were. The three demons were ghouls, demons of the ghost race that normally haunted graveyards and cemeteries. In other words, these things are no threat at all. As soon as Naruto finished his thought, he slid into a ready stance, bringing his hands up to cover his face and chest as he faced his side towards the ghouls, and as soon as he finished he heard Chernobog say, "They know we're here, we have to fight." The difference was that this time Naruto did respond to the rabbit's statement, vocally no less. "Let's kick some feral." The ghouls all turned towards him as he said this before they shrieked in hunger and rushed him with the intent to feed. Play music. SMT Nocturne Ost. Normal battle. Naruto sidestepped the first ghoul's wild swing before he slammed his fist into the ghost's chest, blasting it off its feet and sending it flying backwards before he ducked under the next one's tackle. The final ghoul tried to take advantage of Naruto's current state by jumping at him, intending to pin the human-turned-demon face down before tearing into him with its claws. Unfortunately for the demon, Naruto had no plans of being its meal, and he proved that when his fist took on a dark gray aura before he shot up and sent it flying through the creature's skull with a single thought, lunge. Naruto ignored his now gore-stained fist as he let the ghoul's headless body dissolve into nothingness, instead choosing to roll backwards to avoid the first ghoul's attempt to land on his back. He solved that demon's problem when he put his hands on the ground and shot his legs out in a mule kick to the demon's chest. He smiled as he heard the crunch of the ghost's chest caving in from the force of the blow before he flipped to his feet and lashed out a fist to catch the only surviving ghoul in the throat. He then followed that hit up with another to the face, then the chest, then a final uppercut to the jaw that all but turned the demon's jawbone to dust. He watched the demon stagger backwards as he gathered mana into his right hand to form a small cyclone in his palm, which was soon sent flying through the ghoul's chest as Naruto whispered the name of the spell, Zan. Naruto stood there with his hand extended as he watched the creature shamble towards him before falling forward, dissolving into nothing before it even hit the ground. The blonde grinned as he felt the ghoul trio's experiences flood his mind now that the battle was over, and he raised an eyebrow when he saw a technique the creatures had known float through his mind before it sank in. End music. Feral Claw, huh? Sounds like fun. I'll need to try it out when I get the chance. As soon as Naruto finished his thought, he took off full speed towards the clan head's house, having a vague idea of where it was due to his adventures across the village when he was younger. In fact, he was surprised to see the building so close after he exited into the main road of the compound, along with the surprising amount of bodies littered all over. He shook of the sights of the massacre and took off towards his target building, having just barely noticed a shadow jumping down from the building's roof and into the backyard, leading to his going straight through the house and tripping the security seals to alert the Hokage, just in case he bit of more than he could chew. He couldn't be stupid about this. He did want to live after all. Makoto Uchiha, clan head's home, living room. The matriarch of the Uchiha clan was currently stuck between a rock and a hard place as she watched her oldest son duel her husband in a battle to the death. They had both been startled when they heard the sharp ring that symbolized their security system being triggered, and that shock was what had saved her husband from being skewered by her son as he went on high alert from the noise, letting him trade a quick death for a deep gash on his side. No, she was torn between helping her husband, the man who had given her 2 children and a wealth of happiness and love, and helping her son who had apparently murdered the rest of her clan due to their planned coup. The dilemma resolved itself, however, is when she had drawn her sword and had been about to join her son in putting down her husband. The wound he had received earlier caused him to overextend a slash with his katana, leaving him wide open for Itachi to take his head over with a clean slice straight through the neck, cleanly decapitating the man that had been his father. Makoto saw her son shed a tear for his father, allowing her to see that he didn't have his Sharingan active as he turned on her, his chest covered in blood as he had caught the body over her husband to lay him gently on the ground. Mother, don't resist. I have to do this to keep war away from Konoha. The woman's grip on her ninjutsu weakened as she heard that. She hadn't thought about the possibility of war breaking out as a result of the coup, and she honestly felt like an idiot as she realized that not a single person had thought about that outcome. She noticed Itachi grip his tanto tighter as he got closer, and just before she had given up on fighting, she heard a slightly familiar, yet somehow different, voice ring out from behind her. Back away from her, you bastard. Zan. What followed shocked the woman as a small blast of green wind flew past her and slammed into her oldest son's chest, sending the boy flying back before a cloud of smoke concealed his body and a log took his place. Makoto couldn't help the grimace as she saw that the small wind attack had punched clean through the log before dispersing. What happened next actually floored the woman as she saw the son of her late best friend Kushina shoot past her and jumped at Itachi, who looked just as shocked to see the blonde as she was. However, the woman was more curious about the strange tattoos the blonde had now, along with the strange horn he now sported. The woman, she sank to her knees, suddenly feeling the stress of the recent events starting to get to her. As she sat on the ground, she couldn't help but notice that the chakra in air of the compound seemed off somehow, as if there was something ripping the air apart with its presence. The ringing in her ears didn't help any either. The woman shook off the insane notion as she focused on the blonde boy that was charging full speed at her son. Naruto. Naruto growled as he jumped into the air and pulled his fist back, intending to take full advantage of the mysterious assassin's surprise at his presence to drive a full-powered, momentum-driven lunge right through his skull. Unfortunately, the man was still aware enough to think, meaning that the instant before the blonde's fist collided with his face, the man was once again covered in a cloud of smoke before Naruto hit something with enough force to shatter it completely. When the smoke cleared, Naruto found himself staring at what might have been a decorative statue before its untimely demise. Naruto barely managed to throw himself into a forward roll when a familiar tanto blade flew through the air his chest had just been occupying, and as he hit the ground he blasted a Zan into the man's chest. Naruto grinned as he noticed that he finally landed on the man, and he chased after as he flew backwards through the air before jumping and slamming his fist into his stomach. However, as soon as the man hit the ground, but before Naruto was about to hit him in the chest with a lunge, he was stopped by a kunai flying at him from the stoop of the house as a voice called out at him, "Leave my brother alone, you monster." That shout had come from a fair-skinned boy with duck-shaped hair, which earned a few giggles from the demons currently inside Naruto's mind, and everyone but the blonde was shocked when the kid charged him with another of his knives. Naruto was about to just knock the kid, who was slightly familiar now that Naruto really got a look at him, out with a low-powered Zan spell before his ears started ringing, followed by Chernobog suddenly shouting at him. "Something big is heading this way, it feels powerful as well." The very next instant, the building the boy had just charged out of exploded as something very large ripped its way through the building. The explosion kicked up a large cloud of dust as well, forcing both Naruto and his opponent to cover their eyes in order to keep from being blinded. When the dust cleared, both of the fighters stared in shock at what they saw. Standing on the destroyed remains of the building was a large 4-story tall skeleton made of blood-red bones with a strange design on its forehead that looked kinda like a circle with 3 magatama attached to it. However, Naruto's attention was suddenly drawn to the beast's hands as he saw the beast moving them towards its mouth, and he starting running towards the creature, anger and worry making him ignore the two shouts as he charged the powerful demon about to eat the black-haired woman. Almost immediately after Naruto started moving, he caught sight of his previous target rushing past him, his free hand running through seals as his tanto glowed with a film of chakra. This time Naruto actually caught what the man said as he all but roared, "Let go of my mother." The creature stopped its attempt to eat the Uchiha matriarch as it heard the man's voice, and as soon as it laid eyes on the man it roared and chucked Makoto away before a massive, distorted voice shouted, "Itachi, you die for your betrayal." Naruto had caught that little bit of information as he rushed over to the limp body of Makoto, and he was relieved to see that she was still alive despite being nearly crushed and then being thrown and bouncing against the ground like a rag doll. He still knew that he needed to get Makoto out of here and back to the cathedral, but his demonic instincts were all but screaming at him to kill the feral that had harmed his prize. Deciding to feed his darker impulses, Naruto quickly summoned Alice to let the demon girl take care of Makoto on her way home, knowing that the little blonde chaos demon would take care of any feral demons on her way back as she all but squealed at the chance to play as much as she wanted. As soon as Alice had left his sight, Naruto rushed towards the now named Itachi to see if he could tip the odds in his favor. After all, this demon seemed to have a personal grudge against him, and judging from how Chernobog was screaming bloody murder for him to run, he was going to need all the help he could get. Naruto was impressed with how well the man was handling himself against the giant skeleton demon. He had managed to remove the bone on 3 of its fingers while he was distracted with Makoto with zero knowledge on demon slaying. Still, the blonde could tell that the man was having trouble avoiding the demon's attacks. "It's lucky for him that I'm here then," Naruto thought as he fired a Zan spell at the monster's hand as it descended on the black-haired man. Itachi spared a second to glance back at the blonde before refocusing on the massive monster he was fighting with. He knew that he was completely ignoring his orders, but he was facing a much bigger threat to the village than his clan's attempted coup. He was just glad that Naruto seemed to be on his side now. He really didn't want to have to fight this monster and the strangely tattooed blonde at the same time. Going through a short string of hand signs, the Uchiha sucking some air before expelling a fireball with a shout of, "Fire style, Grand Fireball Jutsu." The ninja was pleasantly shocked when a mini tornado impacted his jutsu, empowering it enough to cause the titanic skeleton to reel back as the flames coated its skull. As the demon was recovering, Itachi took the time to question his blonde companion about his sudden lack of hostility. "Why are you helping me all of a sudden? We were fighting not even 10 minutes ago." Itachi didn't take his eyes off the skeleton as he waited for the blonde's answer, which filled the Uchiha's head with questions when he heard it. "I'm not going to let this demon any closer to my home, plus I really want to test my powers against something that's not impossible to win against. So we better kill it, here and now." Naruto didn't bother to wait for Itachi's response as he shot forward, his fist encased in the gray energy of his lunge skill before slamming it into the creature's already weakened shin bones, shattering them and forcing the creature to fall to its knee as its other leg was destroyed. Naruto was saved from the creature's surprise attack when Itachi appeared near him and moved them out of the way of a wild smash that cratered the ground they had just been standing on. "You foolish boy, why are you siding with Konoha's weapon against us? Does your betrayal know no end?" After the demon roared its question, Naruto wasted no time in responding to the monster. "I can't take any statement against individual thoughts seriously when it comes from a monster with more than one mind. Pitiful." Naruto smirked as the monster began trying to refute his claim, but in the end the monster could only roar in pain as it gripped its skull as its minds began warring with each other. It gave the duo the perfect opportunity to get in a few attacks, which they did as both Naruto and Itachi rushed forward and shattered the rest of the creature's legs below the hip. As the duo retreated away from the monster and getting prepared, and it collapsed to its elbows before wordlessly roaring at the duo. After the monster roared it and dragged itself towards them before it attempted to grab them, and while the duo was able to avoid it, the unconscious boy behind them was not able to. In the following moments, Naruto was caught off guard by Itachi's actions. The man had actually moved slightly past him, screaming in anger as he called out the name of the boy in the monster's hand, Sasuke. The boy started to regain consciousness at the man's shout, and he was quickly made aware of his situation as he called out for his brother as his head was placed into the monster's mouth. However, in the instant before the mouth could close on the boy's neck, he was suddenly replaced by Itachi, and the older Uchiha was barely able to stop the top jaw from connecting with the bottom as it dug into his back. Naruto finally got over his shock when Itachi looked over at him and called out to him. The man was about to call out to the blonde, but before he could get a word out, the jaws closed on the man. Naruto could only watch as Itachi Uchiha was bitten in half by the Odokuro, and the blonde didn't wait to attack as the creature began laughing. "We have won, Itachi. Your loyalty to Konoha was impotent against our wrath. And now we will." The monster didn't get to say anything else before Naruto slammed into its skull, his entire body coated in the physical energy of lunge as he splintered the creature's skull. The monster dropped the man's lower body after the attack, but Naruto ignored that as he reeled his arm back before slamming it into the monster's skull again, punching a hole into its skull as he did. It was in that moment that Naruto realized what Itachi had meant as he was thrown backwards by a sudden explosion. The blonde was sent to the ground some distance away as the creature's lower jaw was blown off by the man's last attack. In the next instant, the monster dropped towards Sasuke, but the boy was saved by Naruto as the blonde tackled him out of the way, suffering a gash on his side as he did. After making sure the boy was safe, Naruto turned towards the monster as it began trying to push itself up on its broken arms. "We will not lose here. We will destroy Konoha. We will not die to the Leaf Village's pet." Naruto ignored the monster's threats as he rushed towards it, and when he finally reached it, he used lunge to destroy one of its arms before launching a Zan spell into the other as he continued past it. With its arms gone, the monster could only watch as Naruto walked towards it, its empty eyes watching the blonde as he moved to finish it off. "How did we lose?" The blonde knew that it wasn't asking him, but Naruto answered the demon anyway as he created a tornado around his arm before reeling it back. "Because you can never predict what someone will do for their loved ones." Naruto would swear for the rest of his days that he saw a glimmer of light in the demon's eye sockets before slamming his fist against its skull, which sent the tornado forward to tear the nearly destroyed demon's skull to shreds. As Naruto stood in front of the giant ribcage with his arm outstretched, he spotted something on the ground where the center of the creature's head had once been. Curiosity overpowering Chernobog telling him to get out of the compound, Naruto went to check out what he had seen. As he crouched amongst the shards of bone and shredded earth, he was caught by surprise when he found a strange bug in the creature's remains. However, before he could grab the bug to inspect it, the little creature suddenly shot into his mouth, skittering into the opening before dissolving to join its fellow in his soul. Unfortunately, as Naruto was adjusting to the sudden, and incredibly painful, infusion of demonic power, Konoha's Anbu operatives had finally managed to finish getting into Uchiha compound despite the odd monsters that had attacked them on their way. What they saw when they arrived at the clan head's building was nothing short of shocking. The professional ninja saw that the building they had arrived at was nothing but rubble, and in front of it was a giant ribcage with a blonde man standing where the skull should be. The ninja were about to move to apprehend the man before he was surrounded in a set of golden rings before he vanished. The ninja were shocked, but when they saw the stun from of Sasuke Uchiha, which the Anbu were quick to take to the hospital. However, while two of the operatives took the only living Uchiha away from the site, the rest moved to report what they had seen to their leader. Cathedral of Shadows. Naruto was barely conscious as he arrived in his room in the cathedral. That did not mean that he was not aware of the fact that his room was currently hosting not only Tenten and Alice, but Kurama, Kushina and the unconscious Makoto Uchiha as well. He was vaguely aware of the fact that he was being yelled at by Kushina, but the pain was starting to overwhelm him. Everyone in the room was suddenly aware of Naruto's state of existence when he passed out. They all started to freak out almost immediately. Naruto let out a groan as he awoke and he kept his eyes closed as pushed himself to his feet, wondering where the screaming pain of his muscles was as he did so. After he was standing, and he finished checking to make sure that he wasn't dead, the blonde finally opened his eyes to see where he was. After he did though, the blonde had to blink multiple times to make sure that he wasn't seeing things. After all, it wasn't every day you found yourself in a circular room that was made of 3 different materials. On his right, the room was made of black rock which had reddish yellow lines, which looked similar to magma, spider webbing through it. On his left, the room was made of solid white marble with golden patterns embedded into it. However, the area in front of him was made of what looked like average building materials like wood and metal, while the area behind him looked to be made of one piece of pure white material. The only noticeable point of entry into the room was above him, as there was a hole in the ceiling where all 4 sections of the room meet. After looking at what the room was made out of, Naruto was able to see the most notable thing in the room itself. In each part of the room was a single pedestal that matched the design of their surroundings. The right had the rock curling into a spiral before flattening out into a platform. The left had fancy marble columns that led into an intricately made golden shelf, while the front area had ordinary-looking wooden platforms with strong metal supports holding them up, and the back just sported short flat spires in the material. It was only after he had noticed the pedestals that he noticed the last strange thing about the room. That thing was that out of all 4 pedestals, only 2 of them actually had anything on them. On the pedestal almost directly ahead of him was a glass dome, and that dome was what looked to be a mannequin of him, which was decorated with his usual demi-fiend tattoos. Below the glass on a small plaque made of metal were the words, "Neutral Fiend." Below the words were a set of 4 indents, though only one was filled with a small red spiral, which seemed like it was the Uzumaki Magatama he had been given when he first became the demi-fiend. The second pedestal was in the right section of the room, but it had what looked to be a crystal flame instead of a dome covering a mannequin of him. However, that was the only similarity it shared with the other occupied pedestal. The mannequin on this pedestal was decorated with what looked to be a black skeleton, with each part of the tattoo matching the bone it was over, going from the ribs to the arms and lower jaw. The only part that was not mapped out was the hands, which instead sported a pair of skulls on them. The plaque below this model read, "Chaos Fiend." Below it was a matching set of 4 indents, though the first slot was instead filled with a skull missing its lower jaw. This must have been the Magatama he just got, the undead Magatama, as the case may be. Before the blonde could do anything else, something suddenly fell into the room from the hole in the ceiling, and since he hadn't moved, Naruto was knocked unconscious by what felt like a rabbit-shaped block of concrete. A few days later, Naruto was suddenly aware of his consciousness returning when he heard the ending of a statement by Kurama, and he was just a bit lost at what was being said. "And that's why I eat bananas like that, Alice. Now allow me to." Oh, he's waking up. In the next moment, Naruto found that he was pulled into Alice's familiar embrace before he finally opened his eyes, and to his credit he was only slightly weirded out that Kurama and Chernobog were sitting at a tea table which was somehow stuck against his ceiling, which Alice had just dropped from. Looking at the other occupants of his room, Naruto was quick to ask what he had missed, and while it only took 5 minutes for Alice to explain what had happened while he had been unconscious, which could be shortened to, "I watched you sleep." The blonde expertly brushed that off though, mostly because Alice didn't need to sleep and spent the time watching him instead. However, he knew that the demon girl would tell him if something important and prepared to relax before the voice of Kurama ruined it. "Hey kiddo, before you get too comfy you're gonna need to go see Kushina and the madam about your little field trip." The blonde gulped at that, already having an idea of what was going to happen when he got there, but he still stood up and drew his demonic companions into his mind before making his way to the madam's room to take his lumps. Madam's room. Naruto was shocked that he wasn't the only one in the madam's room. Well, he had been expecting to find Kushina, but that was about it, but the shock was because all of his friends were in the room. Before he could ask any questions on the matter, a familiarly firm voice orders him to sit, and given who had done the ordering, the blonde was in his seat in no time. As Naruto sat, he suddenly realized why his friends didn't comment on seeing him. The atmosphere in the room was strangling. Now that the group is all together, this meeting can finally start. Gulping, as he usually does when he enters this room, Naruto was once again the person to take charge of the situation by asking the mistress the question on everyone's mind. Madam, why are my friends here exactly? Naruto's voice was apparently all that was needed to give Woro the courage to open his mouth. Yeah, we only came to check on Naruto. Why did you? Woro did not get to finish before he was forced into silence by the madam's power filling the air. Shut up, human, I did not give you permission to talk. After about a minute or so of everyone, except Kushina, choking on air due to the inhuman power, the madam led up before answering Naruto's question. To answer your question, my subject, I have observed your ally's skill in demonology. I have decided to allow the rest of your circle the same privilege. I will accept your thanks at the end of the day. As she said this, Kushina moved to herd the fully human people out of the room, and Naruto stayed to just in case he was in trouble, and he did not want to make it any worse. It was only after the door had shut that the madam spoke. So, I noticed that you snuck out without telling anyone a few days ago, ruining a mess of plans I had laid as a result. And I have to say, Naruto tightened up as he heard this, waiting for the inevitable punishment. Excellent work. You have proven yourself capable enough in combat to defeat a highly dangerous demon with minimal assistance. Your powers as a demi-fiend are truly above my expectations. You may go when you wish, by the way. Naruto was barely able to keep seated after that. He had been expecting to get a harsh punishment or worse, extra training with Kurama. Still, as he stood and he made towards the door, he remembered that he had one last question on his mind. Thank you, madam, but I have to ask, where is Makoto Uchiha? The madam chuckled at the question before answering. She is in training to become a minister of shadows, however you will have to learn how to use that new magatama you found. Kurama will be sure to train you just as efficiently as she did with your other. That was all Naruto needed to hear to completely destroy his good mood. Naruto waited patiently for his turn in the exams as he waited for his name to be called to finally, at long last, become a spy in the ranks of Konoha's shinobi forces. Granted, this test would probably be more exciting if he was 1 year back, as that class was literally filled with clan heirs and other influential children, but he wasn't going to lose the chance to be placed in a team with his friends, including Kaga, who had purposefully flunked her test in order to be in the same class as the rest of them. However, seeing as all this waiting was boring as all get out, Naruto decided to reflect on what happened over these past few years, mainly his introduction to the 4 alignments of demons and his journey to collect at least one magatama from the 2 he was missing. It would sure as hell be more interesting than watching a bunch of no-name generic cannon fodder try to pass an easy test. Flashback start. 2 months after last chapter. Naruto was seated in his chair in the madam's room, having been called here the very second the academy let out. Thankfully, Tenten and the others were able to cover for him when he was suddenly engulfed in the golden rings of a recall spell. He could tell that the woman on the other side of the divider was thinking about what she was about to tell him, but it had been almost 10 minutes and he was starting to get concerned. In fact, he was about to risk talking when the woman finally spoke to him. My fiend, tell me what you know about the forces that govern a demon's alignment. The woman's voice held the same presence that it always did, but he thought he could detect something else in the woman's tone. Was she worried about something? He pushed that thought back for now and focused on answering the question he was asked. All I really know is that Alice and Chernobog are chaos demons, and fairies are a type of neutral demon. Is there something else I should know, ma'am? His question was met with quiet muttering from behind the divider before the woman spoke up once again. Then you and I have a lot to talk about then, my fiend. This is going to take a while, so we are going to be here until you understand it. Make yourself comfortable, my fiend, for I will explain this necessary information for one such as yourself. Naruto was surprised at this statement. The madam was almost always a woman who spoke in short but important statements. This was the first time he had ever heard her speak this much in one burst. This really must be important, though he hoped it wasn't bad news as he thought the Atma information was. I will start the explanation with the alignment of law. This alignment is the main force of the angelic and holy forces. As I know it, the forces of law all desire to bring about their goal of a golden kingdom of eternity and peace. However, those who oppose it call this kingdom they desire the kingdom of stillness due to how they wish to achieve it. Examples of law demons are, as you can guess, angels. The color associated with law is blue. Naruto was shocked at this information, who knew that there was something like this. He knew that there was something similar from the bits and pieces he knew about Alice and Chernobog's past, and while he didn't care enough to pry too much into it, this just made him wonder why didn't know about this sooner. On the opposite side of law is chaos. This alignment's main force is made of any and all demons who don't have any sort of leadership. Examples of the demons of chaos are the undead, any and all sorts of demon that humans tell stories of. Then there is the army of chaos, the only group of demons of this alignment with any sort of leadership. The army of chaos aims to make a world where only the strong survive. The forces of law regard this movement as nothing more than senseless violence and destruction. The color associated with chaos is red. Naruto was once again blown away by this information, mainly because Alice was a part of this group of demons. It made him wonder exactly how much he didn't know about his most loyal demonic companion. Did he even want to know? He didn't have time to ponder his answer to this question as the madam continued her lecture. The third main alignment is neutral. Neutral is the alignment of almost every human and demons that fall under either natural forces or demons that come in kingdoms, like fairies and other such mythical creatures. There is really no main force of demons in this alignment, though this force has been the winner in every war between the alignments due to the fact that a human of substantial will always joins their side and leads them to victory. The color associated with neutral is green. Now that was something he did not expect to hear. There was an alignment that was actually led by humans. That and they always won the alignment wars. Color him impressed. The last, and widely considered not an actual alignment by the others, is the force of nihilism. This alignment has no actual demonic presence, but it still manages to have a presence, and remember that even a small presence is dangerous, for we of the cathedral are always a driving force despite our almost non-existent numbers. Its associated color is white. That is a fact the blonde could encounter, mainly because he was a member of the Cathedral of Shadows, and he knew all about how powerful this little group was, especially since he and his friends made up almost all of the church's offensive power. Now then, my fiend, do you understand this information? Naruto gave the woman an affirmative, and he saw the woman stand and walk over to a different part of her half of the divider. He was not surprised when she spoke to him once again. Then you understand how imperative it is that you gain access to a Magatama aligned with each one of the four correct. Luckily for you, after you found the undead Magatama, I have been trying to get our mutual friend Lilith to start working to assist us in tracking down Magatama. Now all we have to do is wait for her to come to us with the locations. This will give us plenty of time to make sure that you can gain some demons of the three main alignments. This way you will be able to keep yourself informed on the movements of each of them. Ah, here it is. With her piece once more said, and the thing she was looking for apparently found, the madam returned to her seat and muttered something under her breath before a strange item appeared in his lap. He knew that he would get an explanation, so all he had to wait. And he wasn't wrong. This item is an old device known as a smartphone. This item was used in another universe to communicate across long distances, and could even be used to run a version of the demon summoning seal, though it was called a demon summoning program instead. This will allow you to talk with any member of the cathedral, along with myself, at any distance. It also comes equipped with an application called a GPS, which allows you to know exactly where you are anywhere in the world. Truly, this is one of the true prides of human creation. Naruto's surprise was twofold, as not only was he impressed by the flimsy-looking rectangle's immense usefulness, but also by the fact that the madam was actually talking with a large amount of excitement in her voice. Maybe this was the woman's passion, otherworldly technology. Though to be fair, he did enjoy the way the back of the phone was decorated with an angel, a demon, and a human, all drawn in incredible detail. Now then, my fiend, you are dismissed. And remember that I will be expecting you to call every day you cannot visit me in person. This allowed Naruto to stand up and head towards the door, already trying to find his way around this strange device as he did so. This was a day that was just bursting with new things. Half a year later, it had taken quite a lot of convincing for the madam to get Lilith to search for possible Magatama positions, which was shocking to almost everyone at the Cathedral of Shadows because the woman was able to stand up to someone who was literally deaf. Anyway, the negotiations finally ended when Naruto offered to do anything the demonic woman wanted, no matter what it was. It was at this point that the atmosphere in the room went from incredibly tense and slightly murderous to incredibly pleasant, at least as far as Naruto noticed, because he was suddenly dragged out of the room by the demoness as she promised to get to work after she got what she wanted. The less said about the noises that echoed from the madam's room after that, the better. Getting back on track, Naruto was navigating his way to the location of a supposed law-type Magatama with his usual partners of Alice and Chernobog in his mental compendium, though they were joined by Lilith's favor, a Lilim, one of the demon's many children, or so they say. The demoness that appeared was remarkably human-looking, with tanned skin that was a few shades under his own. The next thing that stood out among her more human features was her hair, which fell to her shoulders, with her slightly pointed ears just barely peeking through the chocolate-colored locks. Her eyes were also the same yellow color that his took when he let his fiend energy take over, and seemed to almost always be giving bedroom eyes without even trying. He also noticed that she wore a thin white vest that was just barely able to cover her, and it seemed to stick to said feature like magic, which might actually be true now that he thought about it. He also noticed that she was wearing the shortest of shorts that were also white. Moving on, he was able to see that she had nice wings and a tail that were a pinkish color. Anyway, getting that out of the way, Naruto still hated referring to demons by their race, a holdover from his compassionate human heart Alice had said, so he had named the girl Maya. This had gotten him a much more than friendly hug from the demoness, and had started a lifelong rivalry between her and Alice that he was never quite able to stop. Anyway, that led Naruto to his current location, possibly lost in the ocean of trees around the Leaf Village, wondering if he was even going the right way as he tried to ignore the voices in his head spitting insults at each other. Don't worry, master. Mother wouldn't send you on a wild rabbit chase, unlike certain others I could think of. He could almost imagine the false smile on the demoness face as she glanced over at the pale blonde. Then he could almost swear he heard something snap as Alice responded to this not subtle at all jab. She probably broke Chernobog's neck or something. Don't worry, Naruto. The pale-skinned demoness seemed to draw out his name, like she was taunting her opponent, with the knowledge that she wasn't bound under the cathedral's protective charms, which forced all but the most powerful demons to refer to their summoners as master. I can feeling something powerful in the direction you're heading, and I'll be sure to let you know if that changes. Undead bitch. And then all sense of false positive emotions was destroyed. Night slut. Naruto decided that now would be a good time to tune this conversation out and focus on dodging that giant arrow of light. Naruto hit the ground just a split second before said arrow split his skull like a fruit. The tree behind he was not so lucky and had most of its trunk removed by the arrow's obviously holy power, letting the blonde-haired fiend see just how much damage it was capable of. Turning towards the direction the arrow had come from, and he was not all that surprised to see the form of a creature with large white wings and skin that looked more like porcelain than anything else. The next thing he noticed about the creature was that it had no face, just a golden cross where its face should have been, while the bow it wielded was made of a golden wood-looking substance with leaves that were white as its skin and no visible bowstring. So, you are the lost lamb our head priest has told us so much about. This must truly be a blessing from the Lord. The creature's voice was a strange mix of sounds, almost like it was a recording of various sounds making the noises required for the words rather than an actual voice. Now then, lost lamb, the monster creature was soon joined by two exact copies, though one wielded a sword a shield while the other had a large hammer, both of which were made out of the same not quite wood as the leader. As one the holy creatures announced, "Cast off your demonic chains and prepare to serve our Lord." Naruto gave the monster a look like they were absolutely insane as he allowed his human disguise to give way to his demi-fiend power while simultaneously summoning Alice and Maya from his head, both of whom immediately put their argument aside and focused on the foolish creatures that dared to target their beloved friend master. The sight of the female demons beside them seemed to infuriate the angels as well, and in less than a second, each of the angels had been taken by one of them, with Naruto having taken the divine that shot at him. Naruto started the battle as anyone should, by driving his entire body into the angel's chest in his signature lunge attack, which he followed with an uppercut using his feral claw skill to actually cut the being. The angel, shocked at the suddenness of the attacks, had no choice but to take both strikes before it was sent backwards by a hard kick to its chest. By the time the angelic being stopped itself, Naruto was able to swap to his Chaos Fiend tattoos and launch a bolt of pure poison at it, the Poisma skill granted by the undead Magatama, which hit the law-aligned demon square in the chest. This had the effect of making the demon take a knee as it felt the poison start coursing through its body. The angel had started to raise, suddenly aware that it had underestimated the blonde's level of demonic corruption. Before it could do anything to try and turn the battle around, however, Naruto slashed the angel across the chest with a knife hand as a slight yellow glow surrounded it. This was his static claw skill, which was followed by a finishing move that was little more than a roundhouse kick across the skull. Naruto took a few short hops away from the angel as he wiggled his fingers, and he smiled as he was quickly getting used to how he should act while using this alignment in battle. Whittle the enemy down with negative effects before delivering a powerful attack to knock them down. As the angel was trying, though it was more like failing, to get back to its feet, Naruto wondered how it was that something so weak had gotten a Magatama. It didn't make sense to him. Putting those thoughts to the side for now, the half-demon switched back to his main alignment and decided to just end this battle here. As the demi-fiend was advancing towards it, the angel's mind was racing with thoughts. It had been told that this blonde would be weak, unsure of how to use its power and easily defeated and brought before the high priest. It felt the item it had been given pulse as if it knew something that had not been told to the angel. As it felt this pulse, it suddenly thought something that was borderline heretical. What if it was sent here to die, to feed this weird hybrid creature? Any further thoughts were cut off as Naruto drove his hand through the angel's chest, holding the squirming little bug-like creature that was a Magatama. He smiled at the fact that he had completed his mission before he watched the angel dissolve into non-existence. Sighing at what he was about to go through, Naruto decided to just bite the bullet as he forced the creature into his mouth before collapsing to the ground as he felt the creature begin to warp his being with its power. The last thing he noticed before the pain knocked him out was Maya and Alice rushing towards him. Mindscape. I'm never going to get used to that. That was the first thing he said to himself as he pushed himself from the dead center of the familiar room that was his Magatama room, as he had dubbed it. Turning towards the law section of the room, he was pleased to see that he had claimed the correct type as the platform now had its own glass dome with a mannequin of himself inside it. Moving closer to the platform, shivering slightly as he felt the natural energy of the law alignment crawl over his skin. It wasn't that it was bad, but it was the same for any of the 4 areas in the fact that it just felt wrong. It just hammered home the fact that these Magatama were way more than simple power-ups. Shaking off this train of thought, Naruto examined the mannequin that showed how he would look when he used its power. The first thing he noticed was the arms, as instead of bones or rectangles like the other two, this one had feathers flowing down to